Thursday, October 13, 2022 is a good day. And it is a good day because the world was graced with patch version 1.07 for the best game ever created, Elden Ring. My dear viewer, let me tell you, it is a fantastic patch. There are a lot of changes, and I mean a lot of changes. Almost every sorcery, incantation, and Ash of War received some kind of modification. Most of these are buffs, but some of them are nerfs. It would take hours to review every single change, and that is not even taking into consideration the time we would need to test them all. That said, there is a very clear direction that this patch went, and it is that direction that we will be discussing in the present video. As with all things in life, it is impossible to make everyone happy, and that means that this newest patch left some winners and some losers. Let's get started. The first winner from this patch is the player base. Yes, every single player comes out of this patch winning because this patch did something very important. FromSoft has finally moved forward and created a clear division between PvE and PvP. From now on, there will be different balance values between these two game modes. The damage, the scaling, and the values of weapons, armor, spells, ashes of war, everything in the game will now have two different circumstances, PvE and PvP. At this time, there are not that many differences between these two modes, yet. But it appears that they have laid down the basis to use this system for future balance changes as well. The first advantage of this is that no longer will PvE players have to suffer because a tool needs to be nerfed for PvP balance, and vice versa. No longer will PvP players have to deal with the overpowered values that Elden Ring's PvE brings to the table. We can now have two sets of everything. One of them for the PvE players and one of them for the PvP players. We no longer have to share. PvE gets their balance and PvP gets their own as well. Honestly, this was sorely needed. Elden Ring PvE is tremendously different from its PvP. When you are playing in PvE, enemies have a lot of HP and their attacks do a lot of damage. In order to give the players the tools needed to be able to beat the game, things need to be powerful. The problem was that when you bring these powerful things to PvP, half of them will one-shot you and the other half will completely stun-lock you. This is because player characters are not PvE enemies. We do not have the HP pool or the defenses to survive these tools. Obviously, if something was nerfed for PvP, then that means it will no longer be as useful to take down the damage sponges of PvE. This is a problem, but fortunately, a problem that we will no longer have. If you, my dear viewer, are like me, a true connoisseur of the Unga Bunga, then you will be happy. Indeed, strength builds are winners because most of their tools have received a buff. If you're a player that puts points into strength, then you need to know that colossal swords and colossal weapons have received a faster attack speed and a quicker recovery from these attacks. This means that we can more easily punish mistakes and we can take better advantage of the damage windows that enemies and bosses have. Not only that, but these weapons are also safer. Less recovery means that we can dodge roll sooner after an attack. This makes these weapons more mobile and easier to dodge with. With the ability to attack faster and to better get away from danger, this weapon type has received a much needed improvement in its utility. Of course, everything must have balance, so it is important to also note that the crouch R1s and the rolling R1s from colossal swords has been heavily nerfed. Indeed, those pokes are now nothing like they used to be. Colossal sword players will now have to discover that these weapons have more than one attack. And this is not all. Hammers and great hammers have received a buff to their poise damage. Honestly, this makes sense, and it was a crime that these weapon types dealt so little damage of this type before. With more poise damage, we will be able to get more stance breaks from these weapons, and we will be able to get these stance breaks much quicker. Honestly, these weapon types have a pretty bad moveset, and their damage is not really comparable to their sword counterparts. Now, with the addition of this poise damage buff, hammers and great hammers have a thing that they are really good at. They are going to be really good at bringing enemies to their knees. If you think I was done with strength builds, please take a seat, cause I got one more. With this new patch, weapons in general are going to deal more poise damage if you two-hand them. Seeing as how in a strength build we use two hands for everything, this means that we will now be doing more poise damage with all of our weapons. This is good news, because the way things were before, if you really wanted to break an enemy's poise, then all you had to do was dual wield the biggest weapon you have and keep on jump attacking. It made strength builds boring. Fortunately, now we will have a reason to do other things and explore other weapons that can also be useful for this purpose. For example, if we combine this poise damage buff to two-handed weapons with the poise damage buff the hammers and great hammers also received, well, let's just say that I will be bringing out my old friend, the Great Mace, to make some enemies kneel. Now, it is my pleasure to announce to you that if you're a magic enjoyer, then you have much to be happy about. The first thing to note is that when I say magic, I do mean all types of spells in the game, both sorceries and incantations. I do this to make things simple. Both sorceries and incantations have received a plethora of buffs. Almost every single sorcery and incantation has received some kind of buff, and they have been made better in some way for the players. Every spell has received their own improvements. So, if you're interested in seeing if your favorite tool got something in this patch, you will have to check the notes for details. Right now, I can tell you that there have been buffs to the damage that these spells do. The stamina damage that they do against enemies that are blocking, their casting speed has been increased, the duration has been extended, the amount of status buildup that they inflict has been increased, their FP costs have been reduced, the range has been extended, and they even have less recovery after you're done casting them. Obviously, and I do need to make this clear, spells did not get everything from this list. No, each spell got their own specific buffs. Some of them got more damage, others got extended duration, a lot of them got reduced FP costs. Like I said, you will have to go check if your favorite spell got a boost. I will say this though, odds are it did, because a lot of them did. This patch made it very clear that players should be making a magic build of some sort. Roll up a mage, a priest, a combination of both, but make sure that the character shoots some kind of magic, because the buffs are real and they are serious. One of the best things that Elden Ring brought to the table was the Ash of War system. A lot of really powerful tools and cool looking abilities are Ashes of War. For better or for worse, they are a very important part of the combat system, and many weapons and builds depend on them. FromSoft has decided to buff the utility of these tools. Indeed, many Ashes of War have received some kind of buff in this patch. There are improvements to damage, improvements to startup speed, some durations have been extended, the motion speed of some ashes have been increased, the poise damage has been increased, and some ashes have received additional weapon damage detection. The first thing to clarify is that not every Ash of War has received every buff that I have listed. Some of them got more damage, others got more status buildup, and some are now quicker. Once again, much like when we spoke about the spells, you will have to check the patch notes to see if your favorite Ash of War receives some improvements. I repeat myself, odds are that it did, because the list is very long. I want to make one quick note about a change that multiple Ashes of War have received. This change reads, added damage detection to the weapon part. I am sure that you're asking what this means exactly. Well, there are some Ashes of War that consist of the character swinging their weapon at the same time that they shoot some sort of projectile out of it. For example, Sacred Blade. When you use this Ash of War, the character swings their weapon to shoot a beam of holy energy. Before this patch, only the beam of energy had a hitbox that damaged the enemy. Now, both the beam of energy and the weapon have a hitbox that generates damage. So, if you use this Ash of War in close combat, you can get both the weapon and the beam of energy to hit the enemy at the same time. This is a big boost of damage, and it rewards players that take advantage of the full potential of their Ash of War. The last winner I want to highlight from this patch is Fashion Souls. With this patch, Fashion Souls has gotten a lot better. Maybe you prefer to call it Elden Bling. But the point is that now, with this patch, we can take advantage of more armor to be more protected and look good while doing it. The main reason this happened is because there are a lot of armor sets that have received an increase to their poise. For example, my favorite armor set in the game, the Tree Sentinel set, has received a good boost of poise. I'm talking like 20 points of poise over the full set. After this patch, the Tree Sentinel armor set has around the same amount of poise as the Veteran's armor set. I am happy about this because the Tree Sentinel set looks great and I love to use it. Now I get more or less about 40% more poise out of it, and that's just great. I am sure that other players feel the same. Now they can use their favorite armor set or armor combinations in order to get a character that looks really good and still have access to the magic number of 61 poise for PvP. We have been released. We are free. No longer will we be forced to make PvP builds with the same few armored pieces because they were so much better than the rest. Now we can get 61 poise for PvP and we do not have to wear clown suits. What a day to be alive. Unfortunately, not everyone can win, and this patch does have some losers. One of the biggest losers of patch version 1.07 is every single Greatshield in the game. First of all, when in PvP, the stamina damage that players take when blocking has been increased across the board. Not only this, but like we saw when we went over the buffs to spells, there are multiple sorceries and incantations that deal more stamina damage to blocking players. This means that there is a higher chance that a blocking player will get their guard broken in PvP. This means a critical hit, and that is a lot of damage. Hiding behind a Greatshield while poking with a spear or a thrusting sword was a very powerful technique in PvP. Sometimes it was impossible to beat. Now, with higher stamina damage across the board, it will be riskier to rely on this strategy. You really do not want to be guard broken in PvP. If that were not enough, the weapons that counter Greatshields also received a buff. Both shuttles and scythes have a very specific property that when their attacks are blocked, part of their damage still went through the guard and damaged the blocking enemy. This was the case since the release of the game. Now, with this patch, the guard penetration of these weapons has been increased. This means that even more damage will now go through an opponent's guard when they block attacks from these kinds of weapons. This is quite troublesome for Greatshields. Not only are they going to be taking more stamina damage, risking a guard break and a riposte, but they will also take more actual damage from guarding these attacks. Turtling behind the shield is starting to look like a really bad idea. The worst thing about it all is that I am not done yet. Elden Ring has some spells and consumables that increase the effectiveness of a shield's guard boost. The sorcery, Scholar's Shield, the Ash of War, Barricade Shield, and the Shield Grease consumable all have the effect of temporarily increasing the guard boost of a shield. Well, these tools have been changed. When a shield has a low guard boost, these items will greatly increase it for them. On the other hand, if a shield has a high guard boost, then these items will not increase it by much. The more guard boost a shield has, the less it will be amplified by these tools. Since Greatshields have a lot of natural guard boost, then they will be the ones to suffer the most from this change. Using these items to increase guard boost will not be as useful with Greatshields. This, in combination with all of the other changes, form a perfect storm of nerfs for Greatshield. Oh yeah, if all of the above was not enough, then please understand that the infamous Fingerprint Greatshield has had its guard boost reduced. This is a direct nerf to this specific Greatshield. Honestly, I understand that Fingerprint Shield pokers were very annoying, but I fear that all of these changes together might be a bit too much. Only time will tell. As mentioned earlier in the video, there is now a balanced separation between PvP and PvE. This separation will come into play more in future patches and updates, but for now, it shows a very clear division when it comes to Ashes of War. Before this patch, in PvP, it was very common to be stun-locked and one-shotted by different weapons in Ashes of War. This has now changed. Ashes of War can no longer Vigor check players in PvP. Their damage has been heavily reduced when players are fighting each other. I do not know exactly how much the damage was reduced. I tested a few Ashes of War really quickly and noticed a drop in damage of about 30 to 40%. This is a lot of damage that we are no longer doing, and it is obvious to see how it could change the PvP environment. If the Ashes of War are now doing 30 to 40% less damage, then it will be much more difficult or even impossible to kill an enemy with one shot. Obviously, more testing is needed because at this time I do not have solid results. I did a few quick tests to see how the change is, and I noticed a big drop in damage. That said, once again, further testing is required. This is the first big change that comes with the PvE and PvP balance division. In PvE, some Ashes of War have received damage buffs. That said, in PvP, all Ashes of War have received heavy damage reductions. This makes sense. We need the damage to defeat the bosses, but we also need to not be one-shotted by these same tools. In this manner, we get the best of both worlds. We can feel powerful in PvE, and we have better balance for PvP. It pains me to say it, but dragon incantations have received, overall, a big nerf. In PvP, all Dragon Breath incantations have had their damage reduced. Furthermore, in PvE, Rot Breath and Ezekiel's Breath have less Scarlet Rot buildup, so it takes more exposure to inflict this status effect. It might not be a big nerf, but it might be big enough to force the player to cast the incantation a second time. The Dragon Breath incantations have a lot of range and a large cone-shaped AoE. In a PvP scenario, I can see why the damage nerf was needed. Honestly, it was a bit difficult to fully dodge these incantations. Things were worse when you were invaded in a close quarter scenario. As for the Rot Breath nerf, it is difficult to not agree with it because it made a lot of the bosses very easy. Scarlet Rot is a very powerful status effect in PvE, and having a tool that made it so easy to inflict it definitely hindered the balance and the experience of the intended difficulty. All in all, I can see these nerfs as necessary. It is just a shame that they all had to affect the same type of incantations. In exchange for this, both Dragon Claw and Dragon Maw received some slight buffs. Most noticeably, their FP consumption has been reduced. This is nice, and it will help with using these incantations more often. That said, it is definitely not enough to justify the nerfs to other tools. It is unfortunate, but Dragon Bros have received the short end of the stick. Alright, by a show of hands, how many of you searched for OP Elden Ring build on YouTube? Out of all of these results in the first page, how many of them were bleed builds? Yeah, those were very powerful. Hell, they still are powerful. Before this patch, bleed builds were, quite frankly, overpowered. Now, they're still good, but controlled good. What has changed? The first thing is that when you're dual-wielding weapons, the status effect buildup has been nerfed. So now, when you are using two spears, the name of which starts with Nagi and ends with Tana on each hand, the amount of status buildup will be less. You will build up less bleed when dual-wielding these weapons. This is a simple change, but very important, because now it should be harder to suffer bleed from a simple double spear poke. Not only this, but the Ash of War, Seppuku, was also nerfed. About time too, Seppuku on occult weapons with innate bleed was too good. Now, Seppuku will give less bleed buildup on the weapons it's used on. Not only this, but the character that uses Seppuku will take more damage when they use it. All in all, both of these changes try to bring bleed down to a manageable level. It will still be good, very good in fact. It is now a little bit more under control. My dear viewer, I am extremely happy with this patch. My favorite weapons got buffed, my favorite armor set got buffed, even my favorite Ash of War, Prayerful Strike, got buffed. My favorite build, my Strength Faith Paladin, got buffed all over the place. I was very fortunate, and I am grateful that I will be able to enjoy this part of the game even more. Also, the division between PvE and PvP is one of the best moves that FromSoft could have executed, and I hope that it becomes a standard for all future games. Now, we can have true PvP balance without affecting the experience of those players that just want to do PvE. This is a very good thing. That said, I do understand that there were some nerfs in this patch. If you're a player that was using the tools that were nerfed, I do feel sorry for you. Having your favorite build or your favorite weapon or your favorite spell nerfed is not a good feeling. I understand that, but sometimes these things do need to happen for the overall health of the game. Hopefully, the nerfs are not that bad, or maybe you can find an alternative. I do not wish nerfs upon anyone, but it is very obvious that this latest patch, version 1.07, is going to be very good for the game. In any case, this is just my opinion of the changes that I think are most important. Please, my dear viewer, do not hesitate to leave your opinion in the comments below. Let me know if you agree or disagree with me. Let me know what other changes you think are important that I may have missed. I look forward to reading your opinion and joining the conversation. After all, it is the community that makes this game so powerful. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that I get to see you on the next one.